What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here in our podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? We have a megapod this week. Big one, stacked, so much to discuss. Music-wise, I went to a Kiss of Life concert and had to talk about that. And then in terms of new releases, we have new albums from Jin of BTS, Cordae, and Shawn Mendes. On the TV front, we have the premiere of Dune Prophecy on HBO and the conclusion of Pachinko Season 2 on Apple TV+. I'm over a month late on Pachinko. I've been trying to get to it, finally finished it. I have a lot to talk about that, of course. And then on the movie front, Andrea Arnold's Bird and Jesse Eisenberg's A Real Pain. So make sure you subscribe. YouTube.com/nostalgiapod, Linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See the links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlists linked below. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Kiss of Life's Kiss Road Tour. I saw Kiss of Life in concert in Boston at the Orpheum Theater, and I had a great time. This was my first K-pop concert. If you've been on the channel before, you know I've covered K-pop quite extensively the last handful of years, but I've never actually seen K-pop show before. I think a big part of that is living in Boston, living in the East Coast, but just living in the US in general. You don't have a lot of opportunity to see K-pop groups perform. When they do perform outside of Asia, they're usually smaller tours, usually fixated to a few big cities, and a lot of times groups will get so big that by the time they do perform in the US, they kind of graduate beyond certain cities such as Boston and only play some of the bigger venues at bigger shows. I think of like Hypen, for example, a group that started playing really big venues from their first tour in the US. Therefore, I was equally shocked and excited to see that Kiss of Life was going to perform in Boston during their commercial apex. Like, this is the hottest they've ever been as a group that's, just about a year old at this point, and they're one of the stories of K-pop in 2024, and the fact that I got to see them just after the last album came out, it's really exciting. So a lot to get to with the show. I'll talk about all the songs they played, the general energy, the vibe, everything. But I have to start with just like how the show actually went, in the sense that unlike most concerts we're used to over here, there's no opener, and the show starts very promptly. This was a Door 7, Show 8 concert, and Kiss of Life was on stage at like 8:07. Like, they were incredibly prompt. You had to be on time. Also hilarious to me, but not unsurprising when you think about K-pop stans, the merch line for this concert in the lead up to the show starting. This line started on the first floor, went all the way up to the top of the venue, across the venue, and then back down other sets of stairs. The line was that long. And then by the time you get to the front of the merch line, you find out that the t-shirts are 100% sold out. I think they left money on the table. Either way, energy was crazy. This was one of the loudest crowds I've ever been a part of. People screaming, yelling, chanting. The big Kiss of Life hits that they played them all, of course. Those songs got ravenous responses, people yelling the words. Like, it was crazy to be a part of, for sure. The show was, 2 hours long, 8 to 10, but they only played, about 18 songs, basically almost all their songs that they have. They don't have too many more that they didn't play. Basically, they didn't play the solo songs. They didn't play Superpower, the Valorant, video game tie-in song, but they played basically everything else from all the releases to this point. And they do a lot of editorializing. They do a lot of, talking to the crowd, breaks between songs where they hype up the next song and just kind of interact and talk to the crowd and whatnot. So I don't want to call it dragging out, because clearly the crowd is loving all that interaction, but it's just kind of different. It's not like a straight through type thing. I think a really cool choice that they made was they kick off the show doing Get Loud and Igloo back to back to start the show, and then they even talk about it afterwards that they're going super high energy to get people going. But to pick the two big hits off Lose Yourself, the album that just came out a month ago, got people hyped, unsurprisingly. And of course, throughout the length of the concert, Kiss of Life showed themselves to be great performers. I was pretty impressed. I think we knew they could dance, and you see that on full display. They do pretty, I think, diverse choreography for every song, and Also, the live vocals were there. Was there a backtrack at certain moments during the performance? Yes, I think certainly in certain chorus, some dance moments for sure. But you could certainly hear the vocals. You could hear the breath differences. They're singing live. I think like Julie's rap in particular really stands out. Also, Belle as like the strongest and most vibrant vocalist of the group, really standing out with like those high notes she has across different songs. I think all four of them were really great. Just in general, really like lifelike and animated on the stage and really interacting with the crowd. It was clearly there to soak it all in. There was like a costume change moment during the show where during that time they played like a recorded audio track of like the Kiss of Life ladies talking and whatnot. I wish the show had like some kind of like video wall component to play during that moment. It really kind of felt like a long like 5 minutes of basically nothing happening, which just didn't feel like a great like run of the show. Like the show almost stopped for a second. Like, I saw this at a venue that was all assigned seats, not general admission, which in general I think was confounding choice that they would pick a venue, especially in Boston where we have so many choices for a venue, to pick a venue that was all seating. I didn't like that choice, but it was nice to be able to just sit down and check out for a second while the costume change is literally happening, I guess you could say. In terms of the songs that they did, again, they did all the highlights: Get Loud, Igloo, right into Bad News, Too Many Alex. They tried to do like crowd play with all like the guy names in that song. I don't know if that went super well. They did Gentlemen, of course, Sticky. The place explodes. Probably their biggest song to date at this point. But to me, my favorite moment was actually at the very end before the encore when they did Midas Touch. Midas Touch was like the breakout song this year where I think Kiss of Life really leveled up in terms of getting a lot of attention as a group that, debuted on a small label. Midas Touch was awesome. Also, like their very first song, Shh, was pretty good to end it. Then they come out for the 3-song encore, By My Neverland, No One But Us, and Back to Me. I really liked how Back to Me went. In general, like I think the track list is quite strong. Chemistry, another highlight for sure. My 808 was fun. Gentlemen, even like a song like Gentlemen, which is like just okay to me. Like not a song I love from them compared to their other songs. Like it was fun live, and yeah, I think again just like being in like a super energetic, passionate crowd, unsurprising from K-pop stands, right? Like this was probably the one opportunity you would get to see Kiss of Life in Boston. I mean, they said multiple times that they want to come back, but like, let's just look at history. Like, it's very unlikely that they'll come back. They'll come back to the United States again, but they probably won't come back to Boston again. They'll probably go back to New York City area in the future. So I think people in the area knew that this was like the one chance you could get to see them, but to be able to do that during the hype that Kiss of Life is currently having right now. Again, Igloo, one of the most viral K-pop songs we have right now, just really cool. I think some of the crowd work you could tell was pretty scripted in terms of what they were trying to like hit their bullet points, say what they wanted to say at certain times. But on the other hand, like Belle and Julie as like native English speakers, they were able to carry a lot of the conversation, and Julie certainly was able to ad lib and riff off of what was happening. So yeah, Kiss of Life, Kiss Road Tour. I loved it. Of course, they're kicking this off throughout a lot of North America, and then they'll be going across the rest of the world. So they'll be touring for quite a bit. I'm sure, without a shadow of a doubt, we'll be getting more Kiss of Life music next year. That much is clear. Perhaps a full-length album. That would be awesome. Of course, check out my Kiss of Life review for Lose Yourself, the album. And of course, make sure you subscribe for more K-pop reviews and other music reviews as well. Let me know, though, if you saw Kiss of Life live. What did you think? What was your favorite moment on the show? If you're going to see them soon, what are you most excited to see live? Let me know. More K-pop concert reviews, other concert reviews, music reviews. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Jin's debut solo album, Happy. Jin, the oldest member of BTS, the first BTS member to complete his military service amidst this BTS hiatus we are in the midst of, as we all know. It has not been a quiet year for BTS solo releases, namely RM and Jimin both released their second solo albums of this hiatus period, despite the fact that they're already, underway with the military service. So it's not like BTS Army has been completely devoid of new music to enjoy. Nonetheless, I think a Jin project of any kind really is welcome, because Jin, to me, is probably the least formed BTS member musically. He has the least solo material of anyone out there. He only released that one single, The Astronaut, before beginning the military service. Everyone else released a album or an EP of some kind. So just a smaller body of work solo wise from Jin to this point. And just listening to BTS music over the years, to me, Jin has always been more of a complementary voice when it comes to the whole BTS ensemble in terms of the 7 members. He, of course, has his moments from time to time, but he's not a featured vocalist in the same way other members of the group are. So therefore, I think Jin giving us solo music is a great opportunity to really show another side of him that he maybe doesn't get to do quite as much when part of the larger group. In the lead up to this album, he actually released this single Super Tuna, which isn't on this new album Happy, and that's like kind of like a meme joke song that had existed on the internet in some form before. We don't have to really worry about that. That's more for the heads, so to speak. Nonetheless, he released the single I'll Be There and then Happy out today. Short, 6 songs, only 17 minutes, really more of an EP. I would have hoped for a bit more music. Nonetheless, it's here. Jin's debut solo album, Happy, is a solid introduction to Jin the soloist because Jin is often very complimentary to his bandmates when making music as BTS. This solo album presented, I think, a good opportunity to reintroduce the Jin musical identity to us, and I think it's a solid release. It's very up-tempo, pretty positive, and I think Jin vocally exceeded my expectations on this album. I think for the most part he acquits himself quite well. I would not describe Happy as artistic or as creative as RM's recent solo album from earlier this year, but for what Jin's going for, namely largely up-tempo, happy, breezy music, it's pretty successful. The highlight on Happy has to be Heart on the Window, a duet with Red Velvet's Wendy. I love the way that song starts with just Jin, and then the way the song progresses, and then when the drums kick in, that's the best melody on the album easily. That's a great track. Running Wild with that pulsing bass. Honestly, the chorus, I didn't love the mix. I thought the instrumentals kind of overpowered Jin's vocals, but overall I think the song's pretty cool and almost reminds me of like a Coldplay vibe, a la My Universe with BTS, for example. That song notably has Gary Barlow from Take That as a producer and writer on it. The first single, I'll Be There, I think the drums, pretty lively vocals. It's a fun song. I enjoy it. Track 3, Another Level, is a big context shift because it's just a completely different vibe. I mean, it's a much more emotional song. These heavier, darker kick drums. The production just is not as breezy and up tempo and happy as the rest of the first 2 songs were. Therefore, it's almost like a showcase for Jin's vocals, and I think he kind of holds up his end of the bargain with that song. It's pretty solid. Falling, kind of getting back to the early part of the album, the tempo rising into that guitar line. I think the rhythm on that chorus specifically is quite catchy. I think it's very well produced overall. And the last song, I Will Come to You, simple keys, but Jin gets the showcase again, his singing. It's pretty solid. I think, again, 6 songs. I wish this was longer. I wish there was more of this, and I wish even for a short release, like you think to like V's album from 2023, at least that was clearly like a genre like zeroed in on like torch singing and stuff. So even though it was short, like it was, I think, a really like clear artistic statement. I wouldn't call Happy plain, but I think it's more down the middle and it's less bombastic as say like the Jimin music, for example. So there's certainly a lane for this, and I think for what this music is, it's pretty good. But this might not be as exciting as some of the other stuff we've gotten from the group recently. But again, because I didn't really have much of an opinion at all of Jin as a soloist, as a vocalist on his own, I think this is a pretty solid introduction and certainly really colors in what he can do on his own, and certainly leaves promise for more. Now, do I expect him to release more solo music before BTS reunites? Honestly, I do not. To be honest, I mean, only 1 song before the hiatus, a 6-song, basically an EP after the military service over. I wouldn't expect that. I think at this point we're looking at J-Hope releasing new music. His service is about to end. I'm sure we'll get another Jungkook album. How could we not? He's such a star. Then before we know it, the group will be ready to go again. So that's okay. I think Jin has always kind of receded to the background by design, by his own choice, and just have to be okay with that. But yeah, let me know, what did you think of Jin's debut solo album, Happy? Did you like it? What was was your favorite moment about it. For more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up? Well, Matt, now it's down to Dave here with the review of Cordae's third album, The Crossroads. Cordae back his first album in 2 years' time. And this Cordae album is actually incredibly aptly named. I mean, this is the crossroads of Cordae's career. At least that's how it kind of felt to me, because the last Cordae album, From a Bird's Eye View, was a stark disappointment, and to me a sign of perhaps not a creative step back, but certainly a rapper stuck in the mud, a rapper whose momentum had quickly stalled after so much hype and adulation and excitement, in the lead up to and release of his debut album, which got a lot of Grammy nominations. Cordae, from a young age, when he busts out, people know his story at this point. He was held up as like one of the faces of the next generation of hip hop because he was that exciting of a talent and was backing it up with a lot of great tracks, like a Kung Fu, like a Broke as Fuck, like an R&B with Anderson .Paak. He had some great songs to his name. And then the last album 2 years ago, none of the best songs of his career were on that album. And that's not something you want to say about an artist making an album at age 24. I think back on how excited I was about Cordae music in 2019 when the debut album The Lost Boy came out. And that feels like such a long time ago. And like I just have such a lack of interest in his music compared to what I did back then. I was coming into the Crossroads with effectively no expectations. Again, not something I saw coming just a few years ago. And thankfully, the Crossroads is at least at minimum a improvement on his past work and a sign of renewed hope. Cordae's third album, The Crossroads, is thankfully an improvement on his previous album, which had been such a stark letdown after all the early hype with his career. The best elements of Cordae as a rapper are still on full display. Very technically proficient, really capable as a rapper, as a rhymer. His storytelling is his best strength at this time, but his rapping ability hasn't evolved as much as I expected. His one-liners and punchlines are not really evolved and gotten more sophisticated, which is what I would have expected from him in the early days, given how impressive he was at a young age. I also think at times Cordae can get kind of stuck in his ways and feel like a preachy, old-timey, old-head rapper. If the beats aren't the best, some of his flows can feel repetitive and dull. However, there are great moments where the excitement of Cordae's past comes back on a song like Mad as Fuck, the spiritual sequel to Broke as Fuck off his debut album. It's also, again, funny to reflect on Cordae's music now because what kind of artist he is and has always been, for the most part. Like, yeah, he's did a little singing on the last album, but he's always been a bars first rapper, really in stark contrast to most of his peers at this point. Then again, he's almost like a generation past or sub-generation past where rap is now. Cordae's already 27 years old somehow. The next generation of the actual kids, the rage rap rappers, they do not feel descended from Cordae in any way, unsurprisingly. Cordae really feels more in line in the lineage of rappers twice his age and people who similarly have gotten these comparisons, like a Joey Badass or something, right? But I think the problem with Cordae still is that his discography isn't quite as vast and as impressive as some of those peers. Like Joey Badass has released a lot more music, but also is just a lot stronger of an artist. It's just simply as that. So again, Cordae, I think like this is definitely an improvement. I don't know if I'm fully on board, like in being excited about Cordae's music again, but I'm at least happy that it's a step back in the right direction. Going through the songs, I thought '06 Dreaming, the flow was just okay on this, but it's a pretty solid storytelling, song, Cordae reflecting on his past. Summer Drop, one of the singles featuring Anderson .Paak, but the third or fourth song they've made together at this point. This song stands out with the snare hits, a la Anderson .Paak drumming, but also the When the Summer Drop refrain from Anderson really stands out, makes a song catchy. And then Pac is like actually spitting on this song, which is one of my favorite versions of Anderson. So nice song, really like it. Back on the Road with Lil Wayne, I think the beat hits nicely. There's almost this like phone ketone on this song, very upbeat. And the chorus is actually quite catchy from Cordae, not one of his usual strengths. Perhaps that is a lane forward for Cordae in terms of continuing to evolve as an artist. Nothing's Promised, another pretty good storytelling song from Cordae, reflecting on all the handouts he's being asked for from family and friends. I love the line, "Too many snakes in the grass need fertilizing." The Heard 'Em Say Kanye interpolation stood out. Pretty good. I mentioned Mad as Fuck, sequel to Broke as Fuck. I mean, that's Cordae at his hardest, some of his best flow. I love the call and response. The JT acting up line was very clever. I love the flow switch up halfway through. Songs like this have been what was missing from the Cordae discography the last few years. I was also so happy to get a song like Never See It featuring Juicy J. This is a fire Juicy J feature. This is him at his, classic old Juicy J like vibe. I wish we got more of these features these days. That was awesome. Great beat, very cinematic. Love the song. I also enjoy Pray, Ty Dolla Sign crooning like he does. It fit the song well. Saturday Mornings, our second Lil Wayne feature. This song's just okay. Let's be real. We don't need two Lil Wayne features on any album, but that's fine. No Bad News. This one stands out because, of course, it has 4 Kanye lines, literally only 4 lines, probably AI Kanye, let's be real, notably credited as Kanye West, not as Ye. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about that piece of it, just because it's Kanye such a non-factor on this song, but the rest of it's okay. There's some stuff about, of course, we have the song Shea Afeni, of course, an ode to Cordae's daughter with Naomi Osaka. Syrup Sandwiches with Joey Badass didn't land for me the way I would have liked, honestly. Kind of a classic Cordae and Joey song for that matter, where like they kind of make a dusty song that never quite grabs you. Like they're prone to doing that sometimes. The album ends with 210s, which is a single featuring Anderson .Paak that came out a while ago. At this point, was it last year? The beginning of last year, was it? Also, a really good song, to be honest. I think Anderson and Cordae have great chemistry together. Between these two songs and R&P off the debut album, they should continue to work together. They seem to really kind of hit it off in fun ways. But yeah, Cordae, I hope to hear more soon, and I hope that he continues to, push his career forward. I'm curious, like, is there a lot of attention on this album? I probably don't think so. Kind of fascinated at how this has gone because it's just not what I predicted, years ago. But let me know, what did you think of Cordae's The Crossroads? Did you like it more or less than me? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more rap reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up, Well Mike Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Shawn Mendes' 5th album, Shawn. This is his follow-up to Wonder, which came out way back in 2020. Been a minute for Shawn, and of course, since then, of course, canceled that Wonder tour, or at least canceled most of it. Came out of a very public relationship with Camila Cabello and took a mental health break, receded from the public eye a bit. And despite all that, he's still only 26 years old and has had a lot of pop success to this point, and I think maintained a level of popularity for sure. So the inevitable follow-up to Wonder was going to get some attention. I was certainly interested in just hearing what it would be. That being said, I have to say, Shawn Mendes, 5 albums. This album's called Shawn. One of his other previous albums is called Shawn Mendes. You can't have 2 self-titled albums at the age of 26. Like, come on, you gotta get more creative than that. I think that is hilarious and just not good enough. That being said, Shawn Mendes' 5th album, Shawn, is a surprising sonic pivot that is a lot more successful than I expected it to be. Shawn Mendes has left the over big maximalist mainstream pop that most of his success was built on. He has left that to the past, or at least to the side, with this new music, as he's kind of dove into more folk pop and Americana leaning sounds. And I find this very successful and some of the most compelling music Mendes has made in quite some time. This new sonic direction lets Shawn Mendes, I think his vocals and his songwriting really come through, because the instrumentation is often, in like greater support and like under the surface of the rest of the song. And then when you do get these moments of like ratcheted up tempo, like on the single Why, I think you get these like incredibly like emotional and really engaging moments. I think at times this very acoustic kind of staid instrumentation and production can feel a bit slight at times when the songs aren't quite their best. I mean, this album ends with a Hallelujah cover, something completely unneeded in the pop world. The best songs on this album, though, are some of the most engaging songs Shawn's made in quite some time. And for someone who clearly needed to pick himself up from where he had been as a public figure, as a artist, it's definitely feels like a new beginning for Shawn Mendes, despite the fact that again he's only 26 years old. To me, YYY is the clear highlight of this album. Like that's like an acoustic banger, like as good as it gets. But just I think the way the chorus swells, as it gets really ratcheted up and loud and whatnot, I think it's really tremendous. His vocals fit the song great. And then the next song, That's the Dream, kind of similar vibe almost. It's not quite as big. Isn't That Enough stood out to me because it's like a very like obvious Americana song. Like the harmonica is right there, acoustic guitar starts slow, builds itself up pretty solid. Heart of Gold, I think, is also a clear highlight because the drums are very present on this song, and I think most notably, it's a very familiar Shawn Mendes hook vocally. Like it's probably some of the catchiest music on the whole album. Heavy is interesting because it's really simple chords, but like the tambourine is a nice touch, and then you have these almost like shouty, like big, animated vocals from Shawn. I think it works well. That'll Be the Day, very short song but pretty sweet. Then from there, like in between the mountain rolling right along, not my favorite section of the album, and then of course ending with the Leonard Cohen cover, Hallelujah. Again, one of the most covered songs in the history of modern music. Like it's not bad by any means, but it's just so completely superfluous. And Shawn Mendes like doesn't have a new take on that song. Few people do. So like just don't do it. It's kind of obvious too in terms of like what you're trying to communicate with like making that song. And putting it on the album as like a closer, so to speak. It feels like to me like you didn't really have your own outro for the album, I guess. I think lyrically on this, Shawn definitely communicates a lot of feelings of uneasiness and uncertainty about how he feels about himself and his life and where he's going and whatnot. And it comes across as honest, I guess you could say. I don't know if he's the deepest writer to this point, but despite that, do feel like you get like decent emotions out of him just because that's like the strength of him, singing like as a vocalist. So this is certainly my favorite Shawn Mendes album, maybe ever. Honestly, I mean, we don't have like the massive hits on here. Like, there's no Treat You Better or Stitches or Nothing Holding Me Back on this album. YYY has been a successful song to this point as a single, but it's not going to reach, billion streams levels like those songs. That being said, though, I think this is certainly the most interesting Shawn has been artistically and creatively, despite the fact that he's clearly come across as a talented guy this entire time throughout his discography. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting point in Shawn Mendes' career, and I'm I think more invested in what's to come now than I would have been, before this album came out. But let me know, what did you think of Shawn Mendes' fifth album, Shawn? Do you like his new sonic direction? What did you think? And for more music reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Bird, the new drama film from Andrea Arnold, starring Nakia Adams, Barry Keoghan, and Franz Rogowski. This is Andrea Arnold's first film since 2016's American Honey. I would say, if anything, Andrea Arnold is most in the news lately because her 2011 film Wuthering Heights is being remade by Margot Robbie, and they notably turned down a much more lucrative offer for the package from Netflix to make that movie instead at Warner Brothers with a theatrical release. Certainly an interesting flashpoint in the future of Hollywood filmmaking and where Netflix stands and all that. That being said, Andrea Arnold is back. It's been some time, of course, the celebrated English filmmaker. This film premiered at Cannes earlier this year and is now being released by Mubi. I found Andrea Arnold's Bird to be a really confounding and challenging movie. There's some intriguing elements to it, but this movie does not come together at all for me. Nakia Adams plays Bailey, this 12-year-old girl on the cusp of puberty living in a slum in northern Kent in England. Her father, Bug, a heavily tattooed Barry Keoghan, is her father. And of course, Bug is quite young, had a child at a young age. they live a pretty destitute life. This bug is pretty erratic. Bailey encounters Franz Rogowski's character Bird, this anonymous, mysterious, out-of-town drifter character looking for his lost family. The plot progression is confusingly unspecific, and the movie introduces some hard-to-grasp, more fantastical elements towards the end that just don't really feel paid off or set up effectively at all. I think the portrayals of the community work pretty well. The overall conclusion that you're supposed to get in storytelling, I was just completely lost with. There's a really harrowing scene, I think that's done pretty well, which involves Bailey seeing her mother, who raises her 3 daughters, at a different location, and she has an abusive, terrifying boyfriend at the time, and I think there's some good material there, albeit tough to watch. But I think basically everything but Franz Rogowski's Bird character doesn't work, and I just found so confusing. I love Franz Rogowski. I think he's a really incredible actor who's going to continue to get a ton of attention in Hollywood as he gets more and more famous. I mean, between Transit and Passages last year, like he's amazing. And of course, we know how great Barry Keoghan is. I think Barry does a pretty good job, honestly. He's pretty charismatic as this like erratic, clearly not ready to be a father, but is a father to many type character. And Franz, to his credit, I think does an interesting job of in acting out this really quirky character in Bird, but like the character is just pretty underserved by the screenplay overall. I like Nakia Adams as Bailey. I believe it's her first role. She's pretty compelling as someone clearly coming of age and trying to figure out who she is. She has kind of like an androgynous look. She, on one hand, wants to hang out with her, more hoodlum, hooligan type friends in the neighborhood, but also feels a strong, motherly instinct to trying to help her younger siblings survive a really difficult situation they're living in, despite not even really knowing what's going on half the time. Yeah, to me, it's just the movies does not come together at all. There's some fun music cues. I guess you could say a music humor about a drug toad on Barry's part. I think the scene in the beginning where they're zipping through the neighborhood on an electric scooter, blasting a Blur song, I think it is. Like, there's some cool elements, but yeah, I just feel like the whole Bird angle to the movie doesn't really work, and I think if the movie actually focused on being a bit more traditional storytelling, because I think the overall neighborhood that they're living in is compelling in its own regard, and maybe if we focused more on some of those threads and not this like strange and hard to decipher other character, the movie could have worked a bit better. But I'm sure this is a movie that's going to have a polarizing reception and different interpretations and whatnot, but I'm pretty down on it. Let me know. Did you like Bird more than me? What worked for you about it? Let me know. And for movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of A Real Pain, the comedy drama film from Jesse Eisenberg, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. This film premiered back at Sundance earlier this year, was immediately snapped up by Searchlight, and is now releasing in the fall with an awards run in mind. This is the second film Jesse Eisenberg has directed, and unsurprisingly, a lot of the attention is on Kieran Culkin and his performance. A Real Pain is a great character movie that doubles as a road film, and it's really about two characters and the relationship, Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, playing cousins, visit Poland on the dime of their deceased grandmother to ostensibly go on a Holocaust historical tour to see where their grandmother came from, but in reality, this was more about them coming together. Not dissimilar from his role as Roman Roy in Succession, Culkin is very charismatic and flashy in this role, playing a clearly disturbed person, someone who is having trouble going through life. Because at times it can be challenging because you spend so much time with a clearly troubled character who can grate and be frustrating to be with. The way the movie wraps up comes across to me as a really sophisticated depiction of pain and of grief. I find the movie pretty compelling. Now, there are times when you watch this movie, when you're spending time with Culkin's character Benji, and you're like, man, this guy sucks, because he can be at one time, incredibly charming to strangers, people he doesn't know at all. And at other times, he can be just the worst person in the entire room and the most cringy and uncomfortable person to be around. And as you come to learn more about the multitudes of this character, has someone who seemingly struggles to go move through life, and how that's so, I think, expertly juxtaposed against Jesse Eisenberg's character David, his cousin, who is this successful like ad salesman, married with a kid, lives in New York City, very buttoned up, very neurotic and particular, almost to a fault, and how that's so different from Benji, who is doesn't have a lot going on in his life, but is also at times a lot less secure in how he feels about things, and yet also carefree in other times. Like it's complicated, and I think like that dynamic and how it's multidimensional between these two characters. It's the strength of the movie for sure, and a step up from Jesse Eisenberg's directorial debut when he finished Saving the World. I also really loved in this movie Will Sharp, recently seen in The White Lotus season 2. I thought he was really great, really awesome presence as the tour guide leading this group that they're on. And there's another standout scene in a graveyard where Benji actually accosts the tour guide for being overly expository about the things they're going through. There's a key moment on a train car when they're traveling in first class. Yeah, I think it's a movie that has some great moments and some good character work. And in terms of its awards push, I think it's clearly going to be centered around Culkin and supporting actor. That much seems pretty clear. I don't know if the rest of the movie can get through, screenplay, best picture. I'm skeptical of all that, but whether that happens or not, I think it's clear that Jesse Eisenberg is a really capable and important director, rising director, despite the fact that he's also a great performer. As we know, this is, actually think both these performances are kind of within the realm of what we expect from them, right? Eisenberg can play neurotic like the back of his hand, and Culkin can play performative apathy in a similar vein. So it's a good use of their talents. It's a movie that's on surface can come across as smaller and maybe not as grand, but that's really just because I think a lot of its intentionality and its takeaways are a lot subtler and a lot grayer. And that's just compelling work. It speaks to the strength of the screenplay that Eisenberg was also involved in. It just speaks to the conception of the film, the depth to the characters. So yeah, good movie, one of the best movies of the year for sure. Let me know though, what'd you think of Real Pain? What's your favorite moment about it? And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with the review of Pachinko Season 2, out in full now on Apple TV Plus. This, of course, is the second season of the adaptation of the Min Jin Lee 2017 novel from creator Soo Hugh. Pachinko Season 1 debuted back in early 2022, so it's been a long wait, but Pachinko Season 2 is finally here in full, and I'm getting to this late. Admittedly, I was away when the series wrapped up. However, I did not want to let this season pass me by because Pachinko is still one of the best shows on TV, and even after its second season, is still really underrated. I wish this show was bigger. I wish this show got more awards attention. This multi-generational story taking place in the 1940s and then the post-war period in Japan, and also taking place in the late 80s on the eve of Japan's financial crash. The show is so rich with drama. The character work on this series, thanks to stellar writing consistently, is excellent, and it's just really compelling family drama. Pachinko Season 2 very much continues where the series left off. That being said, I do think the 1940s, 1950s storyline, the past, so to speak, is more integral and feels stronger than the 80s storyline, which feels a bit thinner, at least a bit simpler. That being said, I really love the whole ensemble, the whole piece of the show, and I would love for the series to come back for a third season. The show has not yet been renewed, so we'll see what happens. I have a lot of notes throughout the series, but I mean, it was a long season. There's a lot that goes on. I'll just kind of jump around here. But I think what was really cool about where the show progressed, and I haven't read the book, so I don't really know what to expect in this regard, but the show taking us out of Osaka, basically Hansu being able to save the family and take them to the countryside onto the farm right before Osaka begins being bombed in the later, part of the war. That was cool because it got us to a whole new setting and whatnot and changed some dynamics. But then I was also kind of surprised to see that we kind of ended the war faster than I expected, about halfway through the season. And as a result, we do this 5-year time skip into like 1950, 1951 time. in the post-war rebuild recovery period back in Osaka. And of course, before we know it, the Korean War kicks off. And because this is a show about Koreans in Japan, that is very important. So I was pretty impressed with like the plotting there. And kind of alluding to what I said before, in the late 80s plotting, we don't progress nearly as much time. We actually don't even get to the financial crash. I was kind of expecting that to happen, and it gets acknowledged and talked about, rumored. And Solomon laughs it off in that one scene, but it doesn't actually happen yet. So again, I would love for a season 3 to happen, just so we could see more of that. That being said, from what I understand about the novel, we've already caught up to the present day or 80s day story in the book. So a lot of this is new material, such as Anna Sawai's character Naomi is a complete show creation. Very thankful to see Anna Sawai back on our screens. Of course, this is our first time seeing her since she won an Emmy for Shogun, and incredibly deservedly so. That was incredible stuff from her. The show of the year. That being said, she doesn't get a ton to do in Pachinko season 2. Very much a supporting role, just like in season 1. However, I do think she gets a few key moments. I loved it in one of the middle episodes where Naomi meets old Sunja. Yuya Jun and Anna Sawai sharing the screen together. Great stuff. Jinha, I like him on the show. He's not really to their level though, and you can kind of see in the scene like that. Um, Random note, I loved the young boy playing young Mazazu in the past scenes. I thought he was just hilarious. Like the line deliveries were so good, really fun. That being said, this season is all about the older son of Sunja, Noah, of course, the secret son from Hansu as well. And I think early on I was like, is Noah being colored in enough? Like, is this just kind of thin lines sketched in? Is he becoming a fully formed character? Then by the time the season progressed, I actually think that definitely happened. I think the Noah arc on this season, which is one of the key things a book reader had been paying attention to and waiting for it to happen as they watched the show. The Noah arc, I think, works really well, and the events that happen in the finale of season 2, something expected by book readers, I think those land really well. The reveal about Noah's parentage and how he's overcome by that and what he does in response, I think that really lands. It is a bit of a change from the books, though, and it's left intentionally, clearly open ended for potential season 3, which I actually kind of like because it is open ended, and I think the 1980s storyline has always given it away that there's not going to be a major change in that resolution. We notably spend time with older Mazazu, Solomon's dad. We don't spend any time with older Noah. So like you always had this existential feeling of dread that something bad happens to Noah. I had that as someone who didn't know it was coming, having not read the book. But I do like that we now have this opportunity that Noah has assumed a new Japanese identity in Nagano, working at a pachinko parlor, much like young Zazu, getting his early start. I kind of like that symmetry, and I just would love to spend more time with adult Noah and try and get in the head of why he made the decision that he did, versus it having more finality the way it does in the book. So I think all that really worked well. I think another key element in Pachinko Season 2 is the kind of acted on, but still very warm tension, sexual, romantic, all of that between Mr. Kim, Hansu's basically right-hand man that he sends and has monitor the family, and of course Kyungi, Sunja's was it sister-in-law? Is it? I forgot the family relationship a little bit. Noah's aunt, right? Something like that. Their dynamic and like on screen, and Kim's clearly passionate like love and desire for Kyungi, and how that's not totally acted on, but not totally shied away from. Like I loved all that. Of course, this season also gives us episode 5 of season 2, which is where we spend time with Kyungi's husband, who had been drafted into a factory in Nagasaki, Japan. And we spend this time starting 1 week prior to the bomb dropping. Black and white, square aspect ratio. Of course, despite helping the Japanese war machine, still experiencing tons of prejudice as a Korean in Japan. And then he ends up surviving, basically to pure chance, and then how that changes his character in the years prior with the time skip and whatnot. I thought that episode was absolutely outstanding and what was pretty impressive about it was that only half of it regards the bomb. Like him, being saved and then returning to the family is the other half of that episode. It was, I think, incredibly powerful, and basically it's the Pachinko season two equivalent of season one. What was episode 8, 9, whatever it was, the big flashback Great Kanto earthquake episode with young Hansu. That episode is one of the best episodes I've ever seen of a TV show. Period. I don't think this Nagasaki bombing episode is quite to that level, but it's of a similar vein and certainly was really effective. And again, like I'm clearly dwelling on a lot of stuff that happens in the past timeline just because I think there's just more threads, there's more drama there. As much as I love Anna Sawai's Naomi, it's pretty straightforward how Solomon sees her as a colleague, they become romantically involved, and then they become at odds, and he betrays her with the help of returning Jimmy Simpson. All good drama. I liked it, but I just wish there was kind of more meat to the 80s stuff. And the other side of it is, of course, older Sunja having this burgeoning, perhaps romance, perhaps platonic friendship somewhere in between with this fellow older alone man. And I actually thought that's material was excellent. I love this dynamic between those two. Great acting. And then the reveal kind of about his past, him being a Japanese soldier that was involved in one of the war crimes, massacres of the war, and Mizazu basically exposing that via Private Eye. That angle to it didn't land quite as strongly as I would have liked, just because I was like, I don't know, like maybe I just wanted them to be together and it to be cleaner. I'm not sure. I didn't quite have as much investment in that angle to it. Of course, shout out the opening credits for this season. Everyone dancing in the Pachinko parlor. Fantastic stuff. I think the Pachinko motif and how it's more revealed upon with Mazazu's early days and how he's clearly not the exceptional student that Noah is. I love all that. And then the fact that Noah ends up at a Pachinko parlor as well for very different reasons is really quite compelling. Yeah, I mean, I think this is really impressive show because it has so much on its plate and almost all of it really works well. The production design is absolutely gorgeous. Yes, are we on a few like familiar sets such as the Osaka market and the house and the farm for a while? Yes, for sure. But the series is just so sumptuous and like expertly filmed and blocked and lit and everything that it's just a great time. Of course, I didn't even really mention, but Lee Min Ho, tremendous still as Kohansu. I just think his presence as a clearly like villainous leaning, shady figure, obviously Yakuza, black market, building his wealth, all that, but someone who has good intentions regarding his family and whatnot. Great presence. I really like everything about that performance. I also really love his dynamic with Minha Kim's younger Sunja. Of course, she's like kind of the anchor of the show, and she's tremendous as this character that kind of has to carry a lot and grow up fast, as we saw in the first season. I would say Pachinko season two to me is not quite at the level of season one. Season one like really knocked my socks off, but I also think the narrative was just a bit tighter, a bit more focused in season two. Unsurprisingly, because that's to kind of invent some more storylines going beyond the book in certain respects. It makes sense that the season isn't quite to that level. So I don't have this in my top three this year, but I do have it in my top five right now. Big difference, right? Still great. Would love for Apple to make a season three of this. I mean, they got the money, we know that, so let's hope that they wanna invest in the show and the show is popular enough that they will do it. Speaking of Anna Sawai, they did renew Monarch: Legacy of Monsters for season two. That show's filming right now. That was a show that I didn't even realize was quite as big as it was by liking it myself. So I'm really hopeful that they will be happy to make another season of Pachinko because of the critical adulation, and maybe Apple will be more serious about pushing the show for awards after seeing how Shogun cleaned up for FX at the Emmys this year. That's a bit cynical of a way to say, hey, look at this Asian show made by Asian people. Look at how successful that was at the American Western Emmy Awards. We can do that with our Asian show too. Like I don't want to make it that of a blunt comparison. That's probably some of the calculus that's happening at Apple, unfortunately. However, if that's what it takes to get the show in front of more people and get some awards attention that's so justly earned, I'll take it. So spread the good word on Pachinko. We'll root for season three. Let me know though, what was your favorite moment in season 2. What do you want to most see next? If we do get a season 3, let me know. And for more TV reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Dune Prophecy, the new science fiction series on HBO. Of course, this is the prequel series to Legendary's Dune films, Dune Part 2, one of the biggest and most highly regarded films of the year. Certainly a film that will be in my top 10 at the end of the year, of course. And Dune Prophecy, previously titled Dune Sisterhood, is a long gestating prequel series. I mean, this series was ordered back in 2019. It began filming in 2022, was strike delayed, and of course, this is one of the high profile rebrands from a Max original to an HBO original, just like The Penguin and Welcome to Derry and the upcoming Harry Potter remake series. Set 10,000 years before the events of the Dune films, Dune Prophecy has its work cut out for it to stand up to the sheer excellence across the board from Denis Villeneuve's Dune movies. However, I'm willing to give the show a lot of rope and grace because I love the world of Dune, specifically this version that is being developed by Legendary, and I simply just have a lot of faith in the material. That being said, a prequel set so far in the past from the Dune movies, in this case, the origins of the Bene Gesserit, learning how this order came to control and influence the events of the Imperium in Dune. The stakes aren't nearly as strong, especially because the world seems to be pretty familiar to us in terms of what we understand from the movies. This is a common issue with prequels in general. They're by definition often diminishing returns. However, as a fan of Dune, as someone kind of in the bag for this, I'm pretty excited to continue watching the show, and I thought the first episode was quite intriguing. More so than being 10,000 years before, Dune takes place, and the birth of Paul Atreides and all that. I actually think the fact that we're pretty close to the end of the war on the thinking machines, of course, the world of Dune, they don't have any AI, they don't have any robots or computers or anything because they cast that out in their society after this big, Skynet-esque battle, right? I find that pretty compelling, and it's actually, alluded to in this first episode where the young Prince Sling has a little robotic lizard that's obviously incredibly taboo and against the law and whatnot. I find that as actually an example of Dune Prophecy showing us something new. I hope we can see a little bit more of that in terms of those cultural attitudes of the world. We'll see. It was also nice to spend time in that bar and just see kind of society on the planet we were on, just because again it's a bit of a different spin from what we had seen in the movies, which are very Arrakis based. In this case, the Dune Prophecy seems to be centered on two key planets. That would be Salusa Secundus, the location of the Imperial Palace, which looks a lot different from the Imperial Palace we saw in Dune Part 2. Again, 10,000 years in the past, totally cool. And then also we're spending a ton of time on Wallach 9, which is the location of the Bene Gesserit's academy. I don't even believe we hear the name the Bene Gesserit in this first episode. Maybe that hasn't come to be yet. They're still kind of nascent in their existence and their in the quest of the Order's desire to maintain their influence and begin this scheme that we know well from the movies of them intentionally controlling bloodlines and trying to create the master leader they can control. Of course, the central premise of the Dune films, that's still in its infancy in Dune Prophecy. So again, there's a lot of intriguing elements to this because I think to most viewers, unless you're a hardcore reader of the Sisters of Dune prequel books, this is pretty new material, even if ultimately we know where it's going to end up in terms of being familiar with the Dune main narrative. So potential across the board, right? I think it's all about execution with this show. I think thankfully that the casting looks pretty good on its surface through one episode. We have Emily Watson as Mother Superior, the head of the Order, the Sisterhood, and she's Valia Harkonnen, and her sister, played by Olivia Williams, is also there with her. I think those are two excellent pieces of casting. Also, for that matter, Valia in her younger years in the flashback stuff, we will be seeing multiple timelines in the show, is played by Jessica Barton, another talented actor. I think that casting really helps kind of command the screen in a lot of senses because they have great presence, and we'll see how the writing holds up on this show. I think the writing was a very consistent strength in the Dune films. We'll see how the series holds up with obviously more hours logged. We'll see in terms of the storytelling and whatnot. But Watson and Williams certainly passed the test of the first episode. You have Mark Strong as the Emperor at the time. Doesn't have a whole lot to do in the first episode, looks incredulous most of the time, but we know Mark Strong has a presence, so I'm cool with that. I think the most intriguing character to me had to be Sarah Sophie Busnina as Princess Yanez, who is the Emperor's daughter, has this arranged marriage set up, but is going to go to the sisterhood in the interim because she's marrying like a child. Compelling, and I think in general, I think the strength of Dune Prophecy, in theory, is going to be that palace intrigue, that politicking, that society of the world of Dune and this Imperium, right? I think that's what we want to see done well, and I think that mixed with the machinations of the nascent sisterhood is kind of the appeal with this show. Travis Fimmel as a Desmond Hart, this soldier who returns from Arrakis, he's going to get more involved in the story from what I understand in terms of conflicting with the sisterhood, and there's going to be a lot of undermining of the Emperor and whatnot. So I'm curious how that character goes. I think energy-wise, Desmond Hart kind of reminds me of a less charming version of Jason Momoa's Duncan Idaho from the first Dune movie. So we'll see how the character makes an impression. Also, we know Mark Addy is on this show as Valia and Tula's uncle. Obviously another Harkonnen. Shout out Robert Baratheon in Game of Thrones. Happy to see Mark Addy back. Also in this first episode, we saw casual, use of spice as the drug, and we saw some sex as well. So I think that's another angle that isn't really too deep in the Dune films. That being said, this is very much still in the world of the film. So you think about the Dune source material versus the Dune we get on screen, the kind of sanding down of the Dune story's relationship to religion still seems to be present. This is very much familiar in every sense if you like the Dune movies. And again, raises the original question of what is the ceiling on a prequel series that is so clearly trying to remind you of its more famous predecessors, namely these two movies from Denis Villeneuve. Remains to be seen. Again, I'm giving this show a lot of grace. I thought the first episode was pretty compelling, especially the kind of shock deaths at the end of this first episode. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm in on Dune Prophecy. Only 6 episodes, so it'll wrap up before the end of the year. I would expect this to get renewed for a second season just because it's a big IP show. We know they're making a third Dune film. It makes sense that Warner Bros. Will want to stay in the Dune business, and they're so about their IP these days. We're going to get another season. Whether that second season ends up being the last season, I think will maybe depend more on the ratings and the reception. But it sounds like there's a kind of soft positive response thus far. I'll be very curious about the watch time on the series. Dune Part 2 was such a big success at the box office, over $700 million for a really hard sci-fi movie. Really impressive, especially because the first film didn't make much of a box office impression due to its day and date release on HBO Max during COVID in 2021. Therefore, what is the ceiling of Dune Prophecy as a series in terms of viewership? The Penguin was a good hit for HBO as a big IP show there. On the other hand, we have seen diminishing returns to varying degrees with Star Wars and Marvel on Disney Plus. So we'll see if this can enchant people the same way Dune Part 2 did. And I think that'll speak a lot to the future potential of Dune as an IP, outside of the realm of Paul Atreides as played by Timothée Chalamet. So certainly intriguing to see how that all plays. But let me know, what did you think of Dune Prophecy? Are you on board like me? What do you want to see next? And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. All right, that's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, it's here. It's time. Gicked. This year's Barbenheimer, not to that degree, of course, but Wicked Part 1 and Gladiator 2 are here. Very exciting. And there's also 2 other notable movies coming out. Blitz on Apple TV Plus from Steve McQueen, and The Piano Lesson on Netflix from Malcolm Washington. I'm also going to get to Juror Number 2, the probably final film from Clint Eastwood, and also on Netflix, Emilia Perez, which came out last week that I didn't get to yet. So a ton of movies, ton of notable movies, big movies, small movies, awards movies, all movies next week. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, see links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and I'll see you next week.